Hello, everyone, and welcome back to ThreatPost's monthly webinar series. My name is Becky Bracken. I'm a journalist with ThreatPost, and I will be sort of teeing up our presentation for today and turning it over to our very capable team here. The goal of this hour is to take ThreatPost's very best sources and the sharpest industry thinkers and make them available to our audience to go behind the headlines and get your specific questions answered. And we have a particularly great and exciting presentation today. Immersive Labs has made their team available to us to walk us through a breach like the Colonial Pipeline and to give us a real-time, real-life look into how that actually happens. We're grateful to Immersive Lab for both their support of our series and for their time today. So let me just introduce you to our panelists. First, we have Paul Bentham. He's the Chief Product Officer over at Immersive Labs. We've also got Kev Breen, who's our Director of Cyber Threat Research at Immersive Labs. And finally, we have Chris Pace, and he is the Technology Advocate at Immersive Labs and will sort of be taking the lead on the presentation today. So thank you all so much, and take it away, please. We're excited.
Thank you, Becky. Hello, everyone, and thank you for taking the time to join this Immersive Lab cyber crisis simulation based around the Colonial Pipeline hack, which we've entitled Double Barrel. And to give you a bit of a sense of what's about to happen over the next hour or so, there are no slides during this session. Kev, Paul, and I are going to walk you through a crisis scenario from the perspective of a company affected, in this case, obviously by a ransomware attack. We'll be doing that using the Immersive Labs cyber crisis simulator. That's what you see on the screen in front of you now. You'll also notice there's a URL at the top of the screen and an exercise code. That will remain there throughout the entirety of the session. You can go to that URL on your mobile device or on another browser, enter the exercise code, and that will enable you to play along with us and to cast your vote for the decisions that we should make as we head through the exercise. That's one of the things that's unique about this. It's kind of similar to a tabletop exercise, except for that this is a branching and dynamic storyline. That's the first thing that's different. And the other thing is that we're also going to throw in some technical elements as well. So in some ways, it's not just an exercise in incident management. It also can be a test of incident response or forensics or malware analysis or whatever the elements are of this, in this case, this particular scenario. I think everything will become clear as we move through the exercise. I'm not going to explain too much more. It's great to see people logging in. We can see if you're logging in as a participant up there on the top right. So as I said, it will stay there at the top. I would encourage you to join as soon as you can. It will make the experience, trust me, it will make the experience much more interesting for the entire group. Okay, Kev, do you want to go ahead and start the exercise? And we begin with the kind of the overview. So as I've already said, this is based on the Colonial Pipeline hack. As most of you, if not all of you, will know, Colonial Pipeline, the largest pipeline for refined oil products in the US, was crippled by a ransomware attack not so very long ago. This is an incident that lasted for over a week and really emphasized the fragility of industrial infrastructure. This scenario is based on that crisis. We are working for a company called Providence Pipelines Incorporated, headquartered in Georgia and operating a 5,500-mile pipeline network transporting gas, diesel, and jet fuel along the East Coast. In this case, the three of us will make up the crisis management team, and you are also a part of that crisis management team. We're obviously at the incident management level. Kev's role is much more the kind of the CERT or the security operations. Paul will take a much more business-headed approach. He'll try not to be quite so cybersecurity specific to give some extra context. And I am just basically like the dungeon master, and I'm neutral like Switzerland. Okay, next. Let's head into the first inject then, Kev. Okay, so it's mid-afternoon on a Friday. We as the crisis management team have received a phone call. There's suspicious activity on servers that govern our business network. So it seems to be that computers and servers linked to our business network are locking out users and critical system data has become encrypted. Without these computer services, staff are unable to access customer records, delivery schedules, or billing information. It is clear at this moment that we are under attack, but investigations are ongoing to determine the actual threat. Providence's incident response plan outlines that detection and containment measures should be deployed as a cautionary measure. If the suspected breach escalates to our operations network, technicians could be locked out of key system controls and prevented from monitoring fuel supplies. However, shutting down both our business and operations network will prevent Providence from performing key business functions. What measures will we implement? And as we go through the scenario, we're going to be able to reference this map, which is showing us, you can see those states in green, and that's basically giving us an indication of our current capability to supply fuel. So we'll keep an eye on that as we move through the rest of the scenario. So what are our available options here, Kev? So Kev has opened the voting. If you're logged in, you will now be able to see these options to choose from. I'm going to run through them one by one, and then I'm going to ask both Kev and Paul for what their feelings are about where we should be headed. So for clarity, the incident response plan seems to allude to some kind of action that needs to be taken, but these are the available options. Option 1, shut down the corporate IT network. We can't afford to halt operations before understanding the nature of the attack. Option 2, shut down the operations network. We must halt operations, but keep the business network online to investigate the threat further. Shut down both networks. It's too risky to keep either network online until the threat is investigated and contained. Or option 4, deploy containment procedures only to affected computers. So only IT infrastructure displaying suspicious activity should be contained to maintain service continuity. Another thing that I would mention is that obviously GoToWebinar gives us the questions pane. If you want to ask questions, you can ask them in there, but also if you want to offer a viewpoint, if you want to offer an alternative suggestion, any of those things, that's the place to do that. And I'll pick up those questions and comments as we go through. So these are the 4 options. Kev, tell me what the kind of the security head says. What should we be choosing?
We've got to shut them both down. Like, we're really early into this. We know attackers are in our networks. We know that they've deployed ransomware, and like we know that the OT side of the network is critical, and like it's mechanical. The pipes are under pressure, and if we lose the ability to regulate that pressure, to regulate that control, like we could be putting lives at risk. Like there's actual that kind of danger there. So for me, I don't know what the intent of the attacker is. I don't know what their reach is. We've got to err on the side of caution, shut everything down until we can properly identify, isolate, and return to operations.
And Paul, it looks like there's the potential that you don't agree.
I mean, that's just a typical security response, isn't
Yeah.
it? Risk it.
It's so bad. It's so bad. It's really bad.
Yeah. Damn the consequences. Look, we wrote an incident response plan. We wrote that when it was calm, and when the stress happens, we should go to the incident response plan. We should consider it. The incident response plan said we should deploy containment measures. So my initial instinct here, I think you're jumping the gun as well, Kev. I think we don't know it's ransomware. We just know that there's a threat and there's an issue we're investigating. Your team are investigating. Incident response says containment. So that's good for me, and it's good for the business.
I would argue that the act of containment means I'm isolating the OT network from our IT network, which is the same effect as shutting it down. You cannot access it.
I love that you're having a legal discussion about your own incident response plan. It's almost like this uncovers some of the potential. What's the Mike Tyson quote? Everyone has a plan till they get punched in the face. And so it's great to have a plan. Kev is highlighting risk in a somewhat salacious way, for sure, but it is risk that I particularly love. The pipes might explode. I particularly love that part. but it does seem like shutting down both networks, is extreme. Many of you who've been following the story will know the choice that Colonial made. So let me ask you both to name the colours to the mast now. Give me your option numbers. Kev, what are you? Your option 3,
3.
and Paul, your option 4, right?
4, yeah.
Okay, so we got 38 responses in from the audience. Let's take a look at whether there's any kind of agreement here.
Oh, they're with me.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, and of course, as I said, if you've been following the story, you will know that was the route that Colonial chose to go down. It was fairly close between the two across those 39 respondents. Okay, so let's go with option 3, and we'll move ourselves forward in the scenario.
Evidently, we've got the InfoSec pros in the house tonight.
Yeah, but I mean, of course, your job is to be the counter in a convincing enough way that they're gonna go with the. Yeah, exactly. Okay. Yeah, the risk. Clearly, the risk is such that this was seen as being a worthwhile option. Okay, next. Okay, so let's have a little look at our status graphic first. So we can see that Georgia, which is where we are headquartered, is now showing a warning. Let's go back and see the situation that we now find ourselves in, having shut down those 2 networks. So both corporate IT and operations networks have been taken offline to contain the threat, grinding your operational capacity to a halt. It transpires that we're being attacked by a threat group called DarkSide, which operates using a model dubbed ransomware as a service. Messages are appearing on desktops throughout the network. DarkSide has sent us an information pack outlining which of our computers and servers have been affected. We know from that they have exfiltrated and encrypted 100 gigabytes of company data, and the issue has escalated from a major incident now to a crisis. Authorities have been briefed. The FBI has been deployed to support us, are in contact with law enforcement. We are still actually unsure if industrial systems are safe to turn back on. With the corporate IT system down, our most pressing concern is the automated billing system. And with this offline, we have no way of tracking any customer transactions. And now it's going to ask us what we'll do next. Well, we're going to take a pause at this point to understand a little more about DarkSide and its ransomware. This is some of the more technical elements of the scenario. And Kev, so I'm going to hand over to you to talk to us a little bit about the ransomware itself.
Yeah, so what we've got here is one of our practical labs that can run alongside a crisis sim. So we've got a Windows desktop completely isolated from everything, which gives us a nice safe sandbox to play with this in. We've got some detailed information on kind of what DarkSide is, how it looks, but we're going to actually run this. So DarkSide is a little bit different to some of the more traditional ransomware, in where you might receive an exe file in an email, or you've downloaded, you double click it, it runs, and you've encrypted yourself, you've triggered the ransomware yourself. DarkSide have a slightly different model in that they'll gain initial access via a methodology like phishing, but the actual ransomware operators themselves will manually trigger the ransomware, which is what we're going to do here. So we're going to kind of play the role of the attacker. So I'm going to run DLL 32.exe, and we're going to run that. And I'm just going to start that malware. And that's as simple as it would be for the attackers to actually run this. So they'd use the access they've got, they'd access the command line, and they'd run that simple command. Completely transparent to the user. So you can see something has already happened. We can see some of these files that we had available to us have now changed icons. If I try to open any of these, it doesn't recognize anything here. I also have this very nice email sent to me telling me exactly who the attackers are. This is DarkSide. They've told me exactly what they've done. They guarantee that they have a very valuable reputation. They're going to uphold that, which is nice to hear. And then they give me some instructions. So they're going to send me off to Tor.
I love the warning at the bottom. Danger. Do not modify or try to recover any files yourself. You will not be able to.
So they tell us to install Tor and head off to a website. And if we take a look at what that kind of looks like, so this is a copy of the DarkSide's website before they were taken offline. They run a press center, which is very nice of them. They advertise all the things they're doing. So at some point we become listed on here. So they make it very public that they've attacked us, and then from here they offer us a portal where we can go and get one file decrypted for free, just to prove that they're able to do it, and then they're going to ask for us to pay the ransom, and if we do, they'll give us the decryptor, and then everything will be fine with the decryptor. We'll recover our files, and away we go if we listen and trust DarkSide attackers.
What could possibly go wrong? Okay, right, let's see what our available options here are then. And we know that it's DarkSide that have attacked us. So do we pay the ransom? This is the $2.5 million question. Do we pay the ransom? This is the quickest way to get back up and running. Or do we attempt to, against their quite explicit instructions actually, do we attempt to restore from backups? We don't want to capitulate to a criminal outfit, and our robust backup policy means we can rebuild. Kev, explain to me how robust our backup policy is.
So we do have a good backup policy in place. So we have been taking backups, and it does appear that the attackers have not fully compromised those backups. What we do have to consider is that those backups are probably at least a day old. So restoring from those backups, we are going to lose at least 1 day's worth of data. That's just like, we're not running real-time backups. The earliest we can restore to is a point in time yesterday. So we are going to lose some data that way. We also have to make sure we check those backups, because the initial infection vector might be in those backups. So restoring from backups might just trigger the whole cycle. So yes, we have backups, but it's not quite as simple as just restoring from backups.
Paul, what's your feeling about these two options?
I mean, the fact of the matter is, if we don't know how they got in, then restoring our systems against their explicit instructions, which is going to take time, we're going to lose a day's worth of data, or a day's worth of operational information, and we're no further forward in keeping them out, and we'll have upset them. For $5 million, which is peanuts compared to the amount of money we are currently losing because you crazy security people shut everything down, means that we are now, like, we're losing money every single second that we're having this conversation. We pay the ransom and we move on.
I think it's too, yeah, I mean, it's too easy often in these scenarios to think, my moral obligation is to choose option 2. I am not going to even entertain the idea that I would pay a criminal. But the reality, Paul describes the reality, and I think as well you have to really almost embed yourself in the scenario and imagine all of the pressures that come along with this. Not just that you have to make a choice to restore from backup, but then a team has to actually go and make that happen and know that what they're doing is the right thing and will actually be effective. Because if it isn't, then you just end up coming back to this question again. Option 2 does not negate option 1 returning later on during the scenario. This isn't just a, oh well, we've decided not to pay the ransom, so now we just have to do whatever we're going to do. We do generally find when we run these, and we've run them with hundreds and hundreds of people, and we do find that mostly people refuse to pay the ransom. But what's interesting is that I think if we looked at the stats right now for what's happening with attacked organizations, they're actually paying the ransom more and more, and so you'd want to feel that there must be a reason for that. Kev, a question I wanted to ask: if we pay the ransom, how much can we trust their word on, don't worry, it will be seamless, just put it on some computers and it will all be fine? Is that a thing that we should buy into, or are there challenges there?
There's always going to be challenges there. You have to remember this is a criminal element. So they're not working on top of their ethics from the outset. That being said, their entire business model operates on them being somewhat trustworthy in delivering the decryption. There are a few isolated incidents where people have reported paying the ransom and that decryption hasn't worked. But in almost all cases where the ransomware has been paid that we know of, the decryptors have been functional, not efficient, but like they are functional. The whole ransomware model is built on valid and strong crypto, so giving you the correct keys to decrypt that is valid. And like I said, if they didn't honor this, nobody would ever pay a ransom, so they kind of do honor it somewhat.
So it's less about will the key works. Likely the key will work. They'll give you the single file to test it and everything. But it's more how, if we have to scale this up to hundreds of machines across a network, like could we be sure that would work efficiently? And I guess what you're saying is no.
No.
Yeah.
There's a reason why there are third-party companies who will offer you a custom decryptor with the key provided by the attackers for those exact reasons.
Yeah, and there's more and more information coming out about those companies as well. Like clearly they're also involved in negotiation as well as in actually getting the keys and everything, right?
And in some cases, we actually see the attackers reaching out to those organizations and going, hey, I've just infected these guys. You might want to go and talk to them. We actually see the attackers doing that.
All right, let's see what the audience have to say. We've got a good number of votes in there. Yeah, I mean, I could have predicted that, to be honest, amongst the security. Paul, yeah, you need to up your game. Okay.
I tried really hard that time.
Okay, let's have a look and see what the impact of that choice was. That was the thing that I forgot to mention at the outset of the scenario. You can see there on the right hand side there are some kind of indicators, you might call them impact indicators. Some of them are less directly related to the decisions that we make. Some of them are directly related to the decisions that we make. So it's likely that by choosing to attempt to restore from backups against paying the ransom, that will reduce both our operational capacity as well as our return to operations time. That is sort of obvious really when you think about it, because it's going to take longer to do the restoration from backup and to be sure that's worked than it would to get the decryptor and run it, for example. So yeah, that's how those indications on the right hand side there work.
I did forget to remind us, of course, that 100 gigabytes of company data has been stolen. So restoring from backups, great.
Largely pointless anyway because it's already been stolen, right?
Yeah. I mean, we could just ask them for it back.
They probably want us to pay them
we
more
haven't paid
Bitcoin for that.
Oh, we haven't paid. Yeah, this is true.
Okay. Though some data backups are available to facilitate restoration, many critical backups kept on our compromised cloud storage are unavailable. We have contracted third-party security firms to work with government officials in the retrieval of this key data. In the meantime, we have a number of problems to juggle. Our corporate and industrial networks are practically inoperable. We have no way of moving oil along the pipeline to dependent resellers, and we have no way of monitoring supply to correctly invoice customers. Accepting more oil from suppliers is becoming impossible. They're having difficulty finding contingency plans for adequate storage, and the logistical domino effect means barrels of gas, diesel, and jet fuel are now stranded on the Gulf Coast. The product needs to keep moving, or you risk it stratifying, which I've done some research, so I'll share with the group what stratifying is. It's basically when it sits for too long and it separates into layers, and then it doesn't work as well when you put it in wherever you're going to put it in. That's very technical, doesn't work as well there. Yep, you're welcome. Secondly, retailers and industrial customers use this oil to fuel business critical infrastructures such as Atlanta Airport, manufacturing facilities, key highway gas stations. There are also several knock-on effects that could alarm the public if the issue isn't remediated soon. And here are some examples: grounded flights, down factory machinery. So essentially, it's becoming worse. We look at our little graphic here. I think we've got 2 states yellow now. So again, it's also testing our US geography. I think that's Tennessee and Alabama now both yellow. Okay. Dependent members of the supply chain must be informed of the situation as it develops. How will we make this communication? So let's see what these options are. So do we go with contingency? We will be looking at other transportation methods and using a different pipeline. We will share new plans with you imminently. Option 2, apologize. We apologize for the inconvenience and we're working to remediate the issue. Option 3, reassure. The situation is under control and we'll have everything back to normal very soon. Or option 4, delay. We are undergoing maintenance to restore services and will update you once the situation is better understood. So, Paul, I'm going to ask you first of all, from the point of view of us kind of maintaining a level of calm, what do you think is the best of these options?
It's a tricky situation, but I think this will be something that we've exercised. I think lots of critical national infrastructure organisations that are supplying gas, they will have exercised it. This won't be the first time they've had a disruption in supply. Now, it might not be as catastrophic as this situation, but a pipeline leak or a threat to the pipeline from terrorism activity or whatever, they will have an incident response plan crafted for this. So I, as the executive of this business, will feel very comfortable because I'm well rehearsed in these decisions. I suspect that contingency, so maintain supply, will be the number one choice. It's a sort of a balance between sort of effectively misleading the public, which some of these options are, and then sort of apologising, which is sort of kind of like, oh, I don't know what's going on, sorry, like, which isn't a great response when so many of our customers are dependent on us. So I'm pretty confident that one would be where we would naturally go to.
Just out of interest, which of the two of these do you think are out and out misleading?
I think the undergoing a maintenance is pretty.
That is a lie. Yeah.
That is actually a lie.
Yeah.
And reassurance, given we don't feel like we're out of the woods on this yet. So reassurance that everything will be back to normal soon.
Yeah.
Feels pretty misleading.
Well, I think both halves of that sentence. I think the situation being under control is broadly
Incorrect.
misleading as well, because that's definitely not the case.
It's literally that meme with the dog and the fire in the background, and
this is
everything's
fine.
here.
This
This
is
is
fine.
fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is fine.
So if we were taking the two lies off the table, 3 and 4, we're only left with 1 and 2, and 2 feels like 2 kind of feels like we're not really doing anything. All right, let's see what the audience had to say.
Back on my game.
Mostly with contingency. All right, Kev, let's
didn't have a vote. He didn't have a vote that time, did he? So.
Yeah, he would have probably gone for well, the transparency wasn't really there, was it? Like we're all running around with our hair on fire, wasn't there? So we didn't
I'm too busy trying to decrypt things to have meaningful input into this side.
Exactly.
Restoring from backup because you didn't pay.
Oh, restoring for backups. Yes, I didn't pay. Well, you didn't pay. Why didn't you just pay, Paul?
I wanted to.
All right, so let's go on to the next inject. Process to. Oh, yeah, good. Yeah, good. Let's check it on here. So we're another state into the yellow, Mississippi. Yeah, which I can spell but not identify on a map, so that's good. So processes to secure the 100 gigabyte cache of compromised sensitive data are ongoing. The FBI is supporting the process with third-party services to take the compromised cloud storage offline and prevent further damage. The attack vector has now also been identified. It appears that the threat actor penetrated a subsidiary natural gas compression facility and pivoted to Providence Pipeline's business network, deploying ransomware on both of those systems. So essentially, this is looking like a third party. Our capacity to accept oil for transportation has ground to a halt, with suppliers now sitting on tankers full of fuel. We have regulatory obligations to ensure supply continuity to all parties who are reliant on our services. So if we don't do that, then we're clearly going to be, potentially at the risk of some regulatory impact there. Our legal team have also noted that CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, were made of aware of the incident through communications with other government departments, not directly from us. So it's our responsibility now to make sure that we report to them. So with the implementation of more complicated logistics, which of the following poses the biggest risk to our organization? Let's reveal those options, Kev. And just before you, oh, I was going to say just before you open the voting, but fine, don't worry. Essentially, this is what crisis management experts describe as a wicked problem. That is to say, neither of these answers can really be said to be the right one. So this is all about a kind of intuitive way to think about and try to weigh factors that will give an indication of what is essentially the least worst choice to make, if that's right. Actually, in this case, it's not really the least worst choice. It's more like the best choice based on estimation rather than knowing anything for sure. So option one is people, focus on people. So increased demand on employees means there is more opportunity for accidents to occur. This is also testing a little bit of our risk assessment skills, isn't it? So that's the first one. Option two, environment. Accidents can cause spills of hazardous materials. Option three, security. Contractors from other organizations may not have been vetted to our standards. And option four, legal and compliance. We risk non-compliance and consequent penalties if we fail to comply with an executive order aimed at improving national and federal cyber resilience. So Kev, when you're looking at this and you're weighing the risks, this change in the way that we're going to have to work logistically, what do you think it's likely to have the greatest impact on?
So option four, the legal and compliance. So the executive order like puts in not just process, but some things like some cyber resilience things we have to do. So there's things we're going to have to implement from a cybersecurity perspective, from a cybersecurity policy perspective, and those are going to upset Paul because they're going to get in the way of business. We're going to have to change process. That's going to cause delays. It's going to cause changes. We're going to have to change maybe even things like the network structure. If we've got a flat architecture, that executive order says network segmentation is a key part of that. That could mean we have to take ourselves offline to make those changes. So I think getting an understanding of those early on before the executive order becomes enforceable, for me, that's kind of key.
All right, Paul, what's your thinking?
Well, I mean, what we're doing here is doing a kind of standard risk assessment model, and we're looking at impact and likelihood. I can see where Kev's going, and he's sort of making me pretty scared about some of those implications. But I also feel, and we've not seen how this executive order plays out, but in other sectors in other jurisdictions where regulations been put in place, it's lacked teeth and lacked impact. The fines have been like challenged in court. We've not seen this happening, so maybe the likelihood here is low, the impact relatively huge, but then even the fine side maybe not that significant to me. I'm actually drawn towards two, actually, again, because I'm a business that's used to transporting hazardous materials. I will very well understand this environmental impact. And my lovely pipeline, which is now out of operation, is a relatively safe way to transport all this. Tankers driving up and down the freeways and all the additional transportation risks and the stress of those drivers and the impact of people doing silly things like filling up plastic bags full of fuel at petrol stations feels to me like A, high impact, and B, very likely. So environment probably where I'm drawn to.
Yeah, that's a really interesting
also brand
point.
reputation as well there to add to
that's
that.
where I was going to get to. To me, the impact of an accident that results in loss of life because of the knock-on of this, or an accident affecting the environment that would do huge damage, not only in the context of the of the world, the planet, but also in the context of our of our brand. Again, especially in the wake of having to change the way we work, those two feel to me like the big ones. Okay, let's see if the audience agree. It'll be interesting to see how many go for security given their security types. Oh, not so many. Legal and non-compliance generally was the focus. All right, so let's go with that one. All of those answers were, of course, an okay answer because there wasn't really a single right answer. Right, let's have a little look. Oh no, Alabama's gone red. Okay, so we now have our first dangerously low fuel supply state. Public escalation of the incident has led to a noticeable decline in operational capacity, and government intervention has now attracted, of course, serious media attention. As a critical national infrastructure provider, every second there is a delay in transporting oil costs thousands of dollars and exposes us to serious public and regulatory scrutiny. The majority of these articles is, of course, focusing on the panic buying. Paul just alluded to it, but some sources are also talking about statements that we've made to stakeholders previously in the crisis. At this point, we've given no official confirmation of a ransomware attack, and media outlets are now, of course, all over us for some clarification on what is going on with Providence Pipeline. So, reputation management is the phase we're into now. Revealing the seriousness of the attack in a transparent way could yield negative public perception and exacerbate the problem. However, refusing to keep the public informed could damage our reputation in the long run. So how are we going to balance this demand for further information from the press? Let's see what the options are. So option one, the classic holding statement. We are currently having technical difficulties. Please stand by. Option two, actively engaging with those information requests from the media. So that is communicating the details of the ransomware incident and the crisis management efforts involved. Not engaging with media requests at all. We have higher priorities right now. We should ignore them. Or we should release a reassuring statement that focuses on the measures we're taking to restore the oil supply, not the threat itself. Paul, which of these looks the most appealing to you at this point?
We're sort of in a kind of crazy way. We have seen so many of these incidents over the last few, well, predominantly in the last 12 months, but over the last few years, that we've got some good examples of where it's gone well and it's gone badly. Travelex spring to mind as a bad example, but Norsk Hydro, and there's a great example where transparency really reflected back well on them. I don't. Not engaging is not an acceptable option. I think we've got to do something. So actively engaging would probably be the best thing to do, but I've got regulatory and insurance and shareholders and stakeholders, and that is a little bit too open for my liking. So I'm probably either going down to option 4, focusing on the thing that I know about, which is enacting my crisis response plan to a disruption in service, and sort of playing a very safe game down there at option 4.
Kev, what do you think is the most advantageous? And also, if you could explain potentially whether there are risks in oversharing.
Yeah, so option 2 is where I lean to with all of the companies. So as a security professional, I love that organizations are being more open about these incidents, because it means that I can learn from them. So it's really tough because we're still in the middle of this incident. Like, we've still recovering from backups, or if we have paid the ransomware, we're still going through that, or if we're still in the negotiation phase when this happens, there's still a lot of impact that can have. And what this is going to show is that it's going to show that we're weak. So it doesn't happen very often, but we do see a lot of occasionally organizations get hit by other attackers trying to jump on the bandwagon. We might not have closed the initial holes in because we're so focused on recovery we might not have remediated, which means that we could be coming up against secondary actors. So there is a real danger that we overshare and bring people in. That being said, like I said, I really do like that organizations are more proactively sharing this, and there's a lot we can learn from that.
It's tricky, isn't it? That balance between the industry, the security and the information security industry wants to learn from what's happening to an organization being attacked at that moment, because that threat actor could be active, that ransomware could be attacking other organizations. And so the more we know sooner, therefore the more transparent an organization is, the better. But Paul's right. The challenge with that is that giving away to, well, as you say, creates risk, but also potentially draws unwanted scrutiny from other areas that potentially cause challenges for us. I was wondering about option 4, with the caveat that the reason we're not providing information about ongoing remediation efforts and crisis management is because we want to avoid creating subsequent risks. Maybe we should just be completely transparent about that and say, look, we can tell you everything we're doing to restore the supply. We will tell you about everything that happened in the context of the attack, but we can't tell you that now because we're concerned about the risks that potentially poses.
That actually kind of fits what Paul was saying in the previous thing about focusing more on like the environmental and like the people. So like as a cybersecurity community, we care about the ransomware threat, but 99% of the population cares about getting their fuel. So by going with option 2, I'm feeding a small minority of people who are like watching the crash in real time. Whereas going for option 4, I'm feeding the people who are actually being impacted in their daily lives by this. So actually, I can see where that would be a really good option to go for.
Trying to stop those people going and panic buying, I guess, is the point, right? Although if they're in our red state, they probably might argue they should be panic buying. But we're not going to put that in a statement. All right, what are the audience saying?
Oh, that's close.
Oh,
luckily we've gone to quite some significant decimal places to help with the comparison.
Yeah, 46% versus 48%. Wow, that was close. Okay, so we're gonna
Brexit.
but I think actually, so again, in the past when we've run these, usually it's really high to transparency, and the reassuring statement is not necessarily seen as an option, Paul. So I think you did a good job there. Pat on the back. You probably made yourself up a few percentage points, but not quite enough. Right. So transparency it is. Yeah. Right. Oh, right. Okay. So we now have. Is that North Carolina? I didn't think that was on the coast. Is it on the coast?
Yes.
Yeah, it is. Gosh.
Very much so.
Right. The incident has escalated to national news, and images of mile-long queues at gas stations whip up public frenzy. In response, the EPA and the Department of Transport have temporarily eased various summer fuel restrictions, which will permit greater quantities of oil to be transported by road and air as an emergency measure. So that helps us a little. The eyes of the world are on us, and although the easing of transport restrictions will help, the pandemic is preventing several haulage companies from operating at full capacity because they have a lack of available drivers. Our own technicians have managed to start recovering lateral pipelines within our infrastructure, restoring smaller lines to full operations. This temporarily addresses the direct supply to local areas, but does little to address the overall supply issue. Operations are underway to contract more drivers. The question now is how Providence can most effectively distribute oil through its emergency transport network. Neighbouring states make for shorter transport time, but if supply to major airports can be re-established, a number of strategic risks around international freight delays could be mitigated. So, we've got some news articles in here, Kev. What are these? Oh, okay. Yeah, there's concerns around that's your website there, Kev Breen off of the BBC. Wow, oil prices being affected also by okay, great. take a look at the options. Okay, split the supply equally across all obligations. We need to continuously supply all the customers we are obligated to evenly. Option 2, prioritize the largest customers. Serve those that bring in the most money, regardless of which areas are likely to run out first. Option 3, send oil to the nearest obligated customers. It's better to focus on customers that can receive fuel quickly in order to free up capacity for more deliveries. Or option 4, we should prioritize those strategic airports. Although they take the longest to reach, supporting transport links will allow us to get more oil to more people in the longer run. Okay, Paul, let's start with you. So it basically feels like it's a choice between doing something quick with less impact but some impact, or doing something with a longer tail with potentially more impact. What is the instinct?
I think this is an area where you'd bring in your legal team and you'd be asking them the question of what do our contracts say. So as with any organization, if you in breach of your service level agreements, you are going to be there's going to be some sort of financial penalty. So not only am I facing the financial penalty of not supplying any of my product, and I suspect airports would be one of these areas where I've got some large, long-lived contracts with them, and they are going to be my priority. The idea that we do some sort of hippie, distribute it to everybody equally, because it's like maybe if we were a nationalized business, cough, cough, maybe. But you know, obligate nearest, largest. I'm going to prioritize the ones where the financial penalty is either because it's penalty clauses in the contract or because they are such a big consumer of my product that I want to keep them happy. And I suspect that the airports are those people.
So that's really interesting. You're happy to make a financial decision based on whether there might be a fine or an impact in that way, but you're not prepared to prioritize, even though you know there are customers that make you more money. Do you just not want to say that out loud? Because to me, that would seem that you would obviously choose option 2 then. If you're worried about the fiduciary aspect, you might say, well, in order to counteract any potential fines that I might get in other places, I will focus on making sure my largest customers that bring in the most money continue to get their supply.
I think that's fair. A fair challenge. I'm just hypothesizing, and we don't have that information in this scenario, but I'm hypothesizing that my contracts with the airports are more important to me strategically than my largest customers. But I suspect that probably they're one and the same. But yeah, fair comment.
Kev, what do you think? What you know, in your significant expertise in might any of us have significant expertise in fuel supply?
It depends, is what he's going to say.
He's going to say.
Not really. I'm going to be looking at what the pipeline is a mechanical thing, and just like if we've taken it down, like these things are pressurized and they've got flow. So for me, when I turn this thing back on, I want to get things flowing. So I need to look at who can receive that capacity. And if you've got a valve open and you can receive this, I'm diverting it to you so I can get the backflow coming through, so everything can start moving and bleeding through. So like option 3 is probably where I'm going to be leaning more towards, just because of the technical nature of like opening the pressure, like opening the valves. That
point was made earlier in the scenario about the fact that once it stops like everywhere. So yeah, the point seems valid. All right, let's have a look and see what the audience have to say. Oh, it's a very even split, and it's very close between nearest obligated and the airports. But okay, let's take option 3 then. Okay, so with the ongoing restoration of data from, let's have a little look at our map. What did that change? Did it change anything, Kev? Oh, it did. Look,
less red.
Back to yellow that were red. So that sort of just makes us feel better, doesn't it? If we're looking at that on a big screen in our in our underground bunker, our situation room. I always like to imagine that we'd be in a, if we were doing this for real, we'd be in a situation room. Like really know
low-level lighting.
you know what you have in a situation room. Lots of screens, low-level lighting, old-fashioned conference spider phone thing on the table.
And lots of panicked people running around.
Exactly, yeah. With the ongoing restoration, and always a general who wants to like fire missiles. There's always that guy.
Straight to the kinetic.
Exactly, yeah. With the ongoing restoration of data from backups, the pressure on Providence pipelines, that's a lot of P's, has eased. One of our 4 primary pipelines, more P's, and a selection of lateral pipelines are now back up and running. In addition to the emergency legislation passed to enable that increased road and air transport, more customers are being served, and the backlog of oil, as Kev mentioned, is slowly being managed. It's not perfect, but it's a start. However, there is still a major threat to think about, and we have now been painted as a soft target to potential opportunistic threat actors. Our SOC has received an alert informing us that the primary Providence Pipeline website has gone offline. Oh, this is just getting better and better. Navigating to the company website returns a 503 service unavailable message. Public attention has already been drawn to the error on social media and picked up by news outlets. Based on the information available, what could be the cause of the site going down? Kev's going to show. Oh, yeah, there we go. It is down, and I think this actually happened to Colonial. So let's have a look and see what the options are here. So option 1 is this initial compromise. This outage is more likely down to DarkSide and a continuation of the initial attack. Is it a new attack? Other hackers now know we are vulnerable and will try to attack us any way they can. Coincidental issues, we're experiencing temporary service disruptions to our corporate website, totally unrelated to the ransomware. Or option 4, this is to do with proactive containment. We have taken down our website on purpose to contain any further issues. Kev, which I suppose what we're being asked is which of these is the most likely?
Yeah, so it kind of raises the point that we as the crisis team might not have like a visibility of everything that's happening. So like the website operations team, they're going to sit themselves somewhere else, and they're just going to be worried about maintaining that. So we might not have immediate visibility on what's happening to them. So it's just kind of like picking up. So we're having to make a best guess based on the information we have. So it's unlikely to be part of the initial compromise that would have happened with immediate effect. That it's unlikely that this is happening because of that. We know that attackers do sometimes go for opportunistic attacks. That's a thing we've seen. It's not very often. So like if it's proactive containment, I feel that's something we would know about. Like we would have made that decision rather than the network team. So I'm going to go with it's a coincidence. Like we know we're recovering backups. We know those backups are in part for our customer exposed interfaces. So if I've got to restore the backup, I'm going to have to take it offline and put it back up. There might also be, if this is an internal application, if my team deployed some changes to the database schema today, the backup might not match that schema, so I might have issues in restoring that backup. So I'm going to go with this is entirely coincidental. Like it's a side effect of the restoration process. We don't need to be too concerned about it from a crisis or a security perspective. From a crisis perspective, I think we have to be conscious of it because it is putting us in a bad light. That is how customers are getting information, and it may affect their ability to access portals.
Okay, let's see whether the audience agree with that. Yeah, okay. Use that option, move ourselves on here. All right. So it's now been 3 weeks since the initial attack. Oil transport is back to over 90%. Let's have a look at that image. Oh yeah, we've only got 2 states in yellow now. Fuel supply, distribution and cash flow pressures are beginning to ease. A major root cause analysis investigation is underway involving forensics, threat hunting and cyber defense teams. It's critical the root cause of the network breach is identified and plugged, especially when considering the high profile nature of the attack and the consequent risk of secondary attacks. In addition, the root cause analysis, a viability assessment for migrating larger sections of our network to the cloud is nearing completion. An interim forensics report suggests the hackers used Cobalt strike with a malleable C2 profile and artifact to test Providence's countermeasures in the recon phase of the attack before using Bloodhound to identify the optimal path. Kev, I'm just going to ask you to kind of explain that in English, because that's just a lot of names of different like tools. So why don't you tell us kind of what this actually means happened in reality?
Yeah, and I think like a really important thing here is those are actually offensive security tools. Those are tools designed by the good guys for the good guys that we're seeing utilized by the attackers. And there are whole arguments about should we as professionals be creating those tools. So, but that's what these two are. So Cobalt Strike is actually a commercial tool. It's used to kind of hide your traffic, so it makes your traffic appear like something else. So it can make your malware traffic look like it's going to CNN. So it hides amongst the noise. Bloodhound again is an open source tool, and what that's designed to do is it's designed to enumerate your Active Directory. So it goes into your organization and pulls out all of the data about all of the user accounts, who's admin, who's a domain admin, how do they connect, and is there a way through from my low privilege account to a high privilege account? And it is very effective at doing that. And it's a first step that we see in pretty much every ransomware attack, not specifically using Bloodhound, but that I've come in as a standard user, I need to be an admin or a domain admin so I can have the most effect. So we will always see these tools being used. So that's what they're talking about here. Those initial reconnaissance using some techniques to hide the traffic to make it appear like nothing's happening. And then during that initial compromise, going after Active Directory, getting those high level credentials so they can have the biggest impact they can. And that's synonymous across almost every ransomware attack we see.
Okay, so now our job, having done that root cause analysis, is to decide what is the best way to communicate this with external stakeholders. And as it says here, the options are straightforward, but the potential consequences of choosing each of these is less clear. Our reputation and our share price have already taken damage. So making this next decision the right one is pretty important. So option 1. Do we go with complete transparency? This is the Norsk Hydro approach. Not only will this repair some reputational damage, it will also help other organizations learn from any key lessons. Option 2, partial transparency. Release a statement detailing the cyber attack, the key decisions made, and a list of improvements we intend to make sure nothing like this happens again. Or do we deflect? Our executives have expressed concern about cyber attacks against national energy supply chain at various academic and think tank forums for some time. Providence has done everything legally required. It's grateful for the government's executive order recommendations and will work with other key industry stakeholders towards its implementation, which sounds like a way of saying, yeah, we knew this would happen at some point. Paul, I'm gonna ask you where you're leaning.
There's a really interesting thing that's happening with ransomware at the minute, which I think a lot of organizations are sort of, and that's what option 3 is here, abdicating their own responsibility for this and just say, it's like as if you could do there was nothing that you could do about it. I'm just a hapless victim. It's like, I mean, I know the latest thinking is to put it on par with terrorism. Like, it's not our fault we got attacked. That frankly is ridiculous, but as an executive of this business, it's pretty tempting because we're just like, well don't blame us. Blame
it feels like the current political discourse allows for that kind of approach, because
100%.
basically it's saying this is a thing that is now so serious and, to your point, Paul, almost like impossible to defend against. So therefore, we are completely justified in saying, and the point is made in that, we did everything legally required. We responded to this crisis and came out the other side, rather than, here's what happened and how it will help others to learn the lessons that we had to learn.
And I think what's different at this point in time, with like you say, Chris, political discourse allows us to hide behind 3. Over a couple of years ago, when the Network and Information Systems Directive in Europe came into operation, that pushed the owners onto the operators of essential services, and option 3 would be absolutely unacceptable. I mean, if it wasn't the political climate, I'd be going for 2 at this point. Option 1 doesn't give me anything. Option 2 gives me a little bit of control over the statement. But I think if 3 was on the table, I'd take it.
Kev?
1 or somewhere between 1 and 2. Jeremy, like I said, as a professional, I appreciate that coming from other organizations. So like paying that forward means it's reinforcing that with everybody else. So if I can't do that, it's showing other people they don't also have to do that, and it kind of starts to shut down some of that transparency we get. So 1 or somewhere between 1 and 2.
It's interesting though, isn't it? Because the optics here from our perspective are, we didn't pay the ransom. So if we go with option 1, we already have a moral high ground that other organizations will choose option 3 because they paid the ransom. And so therefore they have to say at some point during that disclosure, and by the way, pretty early on we paid the ransom. Like that is not, that doesn't go over as well I think in the context of, and I don't know what the research says about what the wider public think about the paying of ransoms, but I bet I could take a guess. And so therefore we have a slightly more defensible position if we were more transparent, I suppose. Right, Kev, let's have a look. We've got almost 50 responses. It's enough for us to get a good read. Oh, and look, you said you were split between the 2, and they're absolutely split. Okay.
It's just your mates on tonight, Kev. I got 2.12% of the vote then. Should have voted myself. At least I've got another one.
Oh, we're at the end. There's the confetti. We finished it. So that brings us to the close of the exercise. Thanks all so much for those of you who took part. You see how it really helps to drive the scenario along, to have people's feedback and to see where your thinking is. Hopefully you've enjoyed going through this scenario. If you want to know more about Immersive Labs, obviously you can go and find out about us at immersivelabs.com. I'm also pleased to say that the Crisis Sim is now an award-winning product. We just won an SC Magazine award for this product. So if you're keen on finding out more about it, then please do head over to our website. If you liked listening to the 3 of us talk, which is, I mean, yeah, there's no promises. We're also part of a podcast called Cyber Humanity that you can go and listen to as well. And with that, I will pass back to Becky.
Hi, thank you all so much. That was so interesting and covered so many interesting topics that we report about every single day. So thank you all. I hope that everybody enjoyed it as much as I did. And check back to Threat Post for our daily coverage. And I hope to see you all next month for our little working group here. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.